My name is Steve Jackson. I'm an audit partner with Cohn Resnick here in Connecticut. I'm the leader of the Technology and Life Sciences practice. I want to welcome you. This is our 4th year of sponsoring this event. We're proud to do so. It's a lot of fun, bring a lot of good friends together and from all sorts of different companies. And hopefully you find a day that's a little bit relaxing, learn a little bit about other companies and maybe ways to help improve your companies. Last year, we, as we'll do again this year, we look for feedback from this group as to what would be some of the topics or items that you might want to see in a future CEO forum. And last year, there was a lot of discussion and requests about growth and growing my company and strategies. So we've got a couple roundtables today that we hope are going to feed right into those discussions, and hopefully we'll get some information to you all so you can apply it in your own businesses. I'm going to kick it off this afternoon with a discussion about a strategic approach to growth. We've put together a terrific panel of individuals from companies, Connecticut-based companies that are really diverse, and you'll get that feel when you start hearing from the group. I'll introduce those at the table. First is, to my immediate left, is Tom Patton. Tom Patton is President and CEO of CAS Medical Systems. CAS Medical is a medical technology company that develops, manufactures, and markets non-invasive patient monitoring products. And next to him is Bill Turner. Bill is the CEO of APS Technologies, Inc. APS designs, manufactures advanced and reliable equipment and instruments designed for the oil field and other harsh environments. Next to him is David Salinas. He is the CEO and co-founder of Digital Surgeons. Digital Surgeons is a full-service, digital-first creative agency and a startup incubator. And the last member of our panel is John McCreight. He is founder and chairman of McCreight & Company. So McCreight & Company is a strategy implementation firm. So John spends a lot of time with CEOs like yourself in developing strategies and executing on the strategy. Tom joined CAS in 2010, and when you arrived, was the company's strategy to grow the business formalized? And what was your kind of initial assessment of the strategy and action plans that were in place?
The answer is there really was no strategy, and there was no execution. There wasn't much of anything, actually. I've kind of I've fallen into a career of fixing troubled businesses. So necessarily when I arrive, it means they have not been growing. So you really have to start from scratch.
Yeah. What were some of those initial steps that you took to modify or create that strategy?
Yeah. John and I were talking about this earlier, but you can go into that whole SWOT analysis, your strengths, your weaknesses, and you get your group of people in the room and you put them on the board, and you look at it and you kind of go, well, bullshit. You don't know if it actually is something you want to execute or try and execute or not. My thinking is actually a little bit more basic than that. Actually, it's if you're not growing, you have a people problem, a product problem, or a market problem. And in a situation like a turnaround, I think you have to start with the people to make sure that you've got the right people on the bus and who are smart enough to kind of think through the situation and understand it. And then you work your way down to products and markets, or markets and then products, I think. But in those circumstances, I think what I have found to be effective is what I say to fail fast. That you really don't know, as you explore whether or not you're right and whether or not your plan is bullshit or not. You make decisions, you move quickly, you do it on a risk-based, a risk-adjusted basis, and then if you fail and you're wrong, you say, okay, that didn't work. We need to adjust and go this way a little bit. And so after a while, I think you kind of find your way into the people, the products, and the market. So it takes a little time, but it's exploratory as much as anything.
Terrific. David, I guess your situation was a little bit different. Well, Tom entered into a situation where they were looking for help. You were founder of Digital Surgeons 7 years ago, and one of the founders. Tell us a little bit about working in a small company and developing that strategy, and how formalized was it? And if you look back now over those first couple of years, how did it change, and how often did it change?
There was no strategy. There was definitely no strategy. Things changed quite often, and it was horrifying for the first, definitely for the first couple of years. We were in a really interesting situation. We knew what we wanted to be. We knew what we weren't, and we had no capital to build the company. So we found. Ultimately, we looked for where we could find the most amount of business and attract the most amount of business to the company. I think it was one of my advisors once said to me, "Fast nickels are better than slow dimes," and that really made a lot of sense to me and my business partner. And we went after, and we found some, I guess we call it blue ocean or open marketplace, where we could get a lot of business. And we put all of our effort and capital, and that was about $5,000 7.5 years ago, into that marketplace, which was search, SEO, natural search, or paid search, and drew as much business into the company as possible, built a really great website, and that was the biggest part of the strategy. Once we started to develop, I think, to your point, people were definitely the most important piece to our strategy. So where often companies in my field will have a creative and a account lead the company, we put all of our effort in creative and technology, and kind of filled in the background. After the first 2 or 3 years, it became really critical for us to concentrate on the work we were taking in, and the slow nickels, or the fast nickels, started to, we put the brakes on that strategy and started to really be more selective so that we can really put out the best service and the best products we possibly could. And that paid dividends in years 5 and 6, and really the growth, our biggest growth has been in the last couple of years.
And so you mentioned you've had a lot of good growth over the last couple of years. Your approach and strategy today versus back then, are you constantly monitoring, changing it? How is it different today than it was a year ago, or back 7 years ago?
We're reinventing the company pretty much depends how you look at it, about every 12 to 24 months. And I say that because by the time we reinvent and go through all the labor to recreate documents, recreate collateral, the website, and all of our communication tools, having a pretty lean company, you figure you do the strategy for about a year, 6 months to a year, and then you implement it, and then and then the market's moving so quickly that you have to do it again. So every, say, 12 to 24 months, we're looking at the company and saying, where are we going, where do we think the next step is going to be, and trying, and unfortunately, at least in our business, chasing the edge to make sure that we stay relevant.
And I guess, Bill, I'll go to you now. You're also a founder of your company, but APS has been around now for about 20 years, I believe. So listening to David and his no strategy, let's just go get the fast nickels, does it bring back any memories of APS's early years?
I don't know that our strategies changed from that. We started off consulting, but always were oriented on developing products. And we've kind of progressed from developing specific products to subsystems that we would sell to our clients, to now complete drilling systems. But that took quite a number of years. I would say we always had some kind of strategy. Did we follow it? No. We did exactly what you did. We chased whatever business we could find, and We don't do that as much today, but if an opportunity comes along that's not directly on our strategic path, that's a little bit to the side, I will take it.
Right. Now you're a large organization, as you mentioned. Is the process of developing your strategy and action plans much more formalized, I assume, at this point?
Well, I don't know that it's more formalized, but we certainly are thinking ahead. We're involved in where the industry is going to be 10 years from now. And we're trying to take our current products and put them together in a way, or modify them in a way that will suit the industry of tomorrow. This is the oil and gas industry.
And when you're developing those plans, I know, I'm sure, David, you had just a couple of folks at the beginning that you had to develop your strategy and get agreement with. Now you have a larger management group, you have different ownerships and different factions in your organization that perhaps you need to get on board and get some input from. Do you seek out those opportunities and to make those changes in your strategy and implement? Yes.
Yeah, well, this is a problem because it depends on how far out you want to look for your company, right? So there certainly are guys on our management team who really want to maximize our earnings today. And I have a little bit different approach, but I want to be doing some things for the future. So there's disagreement, I'd say regular. And so, it's with me to kind of do that strategic plan and then try and sell it to the other guys, and they don't all buy it, but I'm in charge.
Okay, thanks, Philip. John, I know you work with a lot of different CEOs and different companies to develop and execute on strategies. How does your approach change when you're working with smaller companies versus larger companies?
It's interesting. I grew up in a large company when I had a real job before I got into consulting 43 years ago. And I always thought that big companies were unique, and they are, but compared to small companies. And I didn't think there was much transferability between big companies and small. But I've learned over the last 10 years that the problems that small companies have are very similar to the ones that the big companies have. It's just a different scale issue. So instead of trying to convince one marketing person, this is what we're going to do, you're trying to convince 100 marketing people what to do. But the problems are very, very similar. We're working with a smaller company now that's under 50 million. And the problems that the CEO has are really stunning in the complexity of them, because they're dealing with other big companies. It's a global business. And so there's not that much difference between the challenges that a CEO in a small company has and larger. It's just the number of people you have to persuade to do things differently. The complexity is there. It didn't used to be there, it doesn't seem to me.
That's interesting. Any common keys to kind of developing and executing a successful strategy?
Well, the one thing we encourage CEOs to work hard on is the thing that you talked about. It's the people. If you get the right athletes, you can play the game you want to play. But if you don't have the right athletes, you have to pick a new game, because the competitors have the athletes, or at least they hope they do. And so we obsess about the athletes. And if Mary or Charlie can't do the job you need them to do, what can they do? And if they can't do it, then find them something else to do with their lives. And that's hard. We went through that recently in my own firm. There was someone that really couldn't do it, and it took me 2 years to decide to do something about it. And now it's the best thing in the world for that person and for the firm. So it's hard to cut people who don't have the athletic ability. If you see you and I stand next to one another, then no, God didn't have pro basketball in mind for me. Maybe you, but not me. And so if it's about basketball, don't put me out there. Put me in a place where I can do the job. So I think it's about athletes first, second, and third, and then we can get to some of the other more esoteric stuff in our view.
Yeah, that sounds easier than than it probably is in reality. I don't know. Maybe some of the others panelists can talk about and comment on people issues. And Tom, you mentioned that was one of the concerns you had when you first joined CAS.
Yeah, actually, I was listening to David talk. He said it in a sentence. Well, we saw this big market opportunity where there was a complete vacancy. We moved into it. We've been very successful. But that's brilliant. And that just doesn't happen because there's lots of other people who are probably in the same situation, went in some other direction that wasn't as brilliant. And so some of it's just an innate talent to be able to be close to the customer and understand where it's going. In the business, typically in these businesses that I come into, and CAS Medical in particular, the strategy is for the growth strategy in terms of its outlook and how far we're looking forward really varies. And in the first week, as I assembled the management team that was assigned to me, basically, everybody said, "Hey, we need a vision. We need to sit down, and we need to have a vision so we can all be behind something and move forward." And my answer was, well, I don't know that we've got the people in the room to actually create the vision. And so we're actually now 4 years in. We've got a terrific management team. Actually, there's only 2 of the 10 top managers that were there previously are still there with the company today. But now we're in a spot where we're looking forward. We're beginning to look forward now. Before it was, how do you get to the payroll for the next month? And then how do you move on from there? What assets can you sell? You start looking at your various product offerings. Now we're thinking, okay, now what's next? What's 4 or 5 years away from, where are we going to be 4 or 5 years from now? What are we going to buy? What are we going to sell? Broader applications like that, because we've got the talent in the room to actually do it.
I would just add to the conversation about people is, and I learned this a little bit late in the course of this business, but probably my most valuable lesson was hire slow, fire fast, and like you said,
A bad hire never got better.
Exactly. But sometimes they're not a bad hire when you first hire them. And to your point, if you're running, I'm going to use a football analogy, if hopefully everybody gets it, but if you're running a 3-4 defense and then you need to run a 4-3, the players may not be the right players. And for us, as the company is growing, and we're growing from essentially what was a startup to a company that is diversifying both as a creative and marketing agency and then a startup incubator and accelerator, the team, not everyone, but there's been a couple of key people that were with us for 5-6 years, and in our situation where we had no capital, we never took on investment, we never took on any debt, everyone grew together. It's hard to look at those people and say, you're not suitable for this new strategy, and over the last 24 months, that's been really the key piece for us. And then, either moving them to either, in some cases having to demote people or let them go and bring on key people that can fill that role. It's really been something difficult for me to deal with, and my co-founder, more me because he makes me fire everybody. But it's really important and to understand, I think, for the growth of the company and the strength.
The one thing that we've done is on hiring people, even though when a good person comes along, whether it's technical skills or business skills, we've hired that person even if we didn't have a job open. So I would say, if someone's available who can add to your company in any way, and you think they're highly skilled and highly motivated, take them on even though you don't have a position for them. Find a position, and a year from now it'll really pay off.
That's good advice.
We see it, if I can interrupt it, we see that situation on boards. We do a fair amount of work with boards and restructuring boards because they're a corporate asset or a corporate liability depending on which they are. But one of the reasons that boards don't get stronger is chairmen and CEOs aren't always, they're recruiting potential directors. Say, I don't need you now, but now if I can get you, I'm going to get rid of Charlie because Charlie's not as talented. So it's having a pool of talent that you can draw on and continue to grow the company, even the board. I would just offer your story applies to directors as well.
Actually, I have one more comment about people too, especially small businesses. I mean, businesses, $50 million or less. Both as a CEO and for a while, I was in private equity where we actually invested in companies about that size in the healthcare space. And I was amazed how much typically just one or two people could make to the organization. A key sales and marketing role, maybe a COO type, an operating CFO, but it's not, just one or two people, best athlete types that you'd hire into the team, and it just changes the whole dynamic of the organization. And to find those people, they're precious few, but you find them, you gotta latch on to them.
A lot of times I think about growth and I'm thinking about top line growth. And, does it always though convert to kind of bottom line profitability? So, when you're thinking about your strategies, how do you consider profitability in your plans?
We focused on top line growth because originally our strategy was build a business and sell it. We knew exactly who's in the industry, that we were a really exciting company. Throughout the 8 years, we've gotten about 10, we've been approached about 10 different times, and originally it was exciting for us, it was great for learning, and we knew that top line revenue was critical to get to a specific number, to get the offer that we wanted. So we focused on that for, I'd say, the first 3 or 4 years. Once we realized that we really didn't want to sell and that we liked the control that we had, and we also heard tons of nightmare stories from other CEOs and founders that had sold their companies, we also realized that we wanted to get we started to work with more startups and incubating and accelerating companies. Then we started to focus more on efficiency and profitability. And we did that for a couple of years and got us to the numbers that we felt either matched or surpassed the industry standards. In our industry, it's typically like 16 to 20% margins. Once we did that, then we again reinvested into the company and started to focus again on top line growth. So it's really just a matter of where you are, the momentum, feeling the business. For us, it's been a lot about intuition and being able to have that gut, because we don't necessarily have the smartest people around us and CFOs and COOs, because we don't have that ability to bring those people into the company yet. But we have smart advisors, and we're just really in tune with the business. So when you feel momentum, you know when to invest, when to go after top line revenue, and then when you feel like things are getting tight and you feel like you really need to focus on efficiencies and profitability, I feel like any good CEO is going to know that.
Right. So I know, Tom, at CAS, your strategy initially was investing in new products, and growth was not kind of in the plan initially, right? I mean, it was more of a long-term growth opportunity.
Yeah, I think that decision between growth versus profitability is really as much as anything a question about capital and access to it. I mean, and it's sort of that simple. If you can afford to get capital, or you have capital and you can afford to invest heavily, then you're taking some big bets either on your money and somebody else's money, but maybe you can convince somebody that. It was actually in the first year at CAS, we didn't have access to capital we're a public company without just incredible dilution to our shareholders. So we had to figure out just how to survive on the cash that we generated, and in fact. Part of that survival strategy was to sell some assets, and so we actually sold some assets, raised some cash that way, cut heads, reduced certain parts of our spend, while we then developed more of a growth strategy, ideas around new products which then, with a couple of key managers, at that point, two new managers plus me, we took it out to private equity firms, and were able, at that stage, after about a year and a half, to sell the story that here, if you give us, at this point, $15 million, we'll give you a multiple of that back with our investment strategy for new products and distribution expansion.
Were others limited by capital in your strategy? And David, you mentioned you were very thinly capitalized at first. I know, Bill, has capital been a problem with your company and had any impact on your strategy?
We have access to capital now, but it wasn't always the case. And really, to expand our business the way we'd like to could take huge amounts of capital because we're working internationally. So you're setting up field facilities all around the world. We haven't done that. We do operate in China and Dubai with field facilities there, but we haven't gone everywhere that the oil field is because we don't have the capital. And but I would also say, even if we had the capital, I don't know if we'd do it. We've got to be very cautious about it. We've never focused on. I've never focused on profitability. Right? I always want it profitable, but that's never been the driver. It's always develop a new product, get it out there, try and get it into the marketplace, and we'll make it profitable. It's never the lead for me. We got to generate enough cash to run the business, but that's not our focus.
When we spoke earlier this week, you mentioned that really customers seem to be an important driver in your development of your strategy. Maybe you could comment on that a little bit.
Well, I mean, we have certain ideas of where we want the company to go and what our next product should be. But if a customer comes along and has an idea that maybe it's not on that path, we're going to try and develop it for him. I think the important thing is for us, when we develop new products, is that we have a customer in mind, someone who's going to take that product and test it. It's the hardest thing we face in product development is testing downhole in the oil wells. So it's important to get customer buy-in on any of our development projects. So when a customer comes to us, we take advantage of that opportunity.
John, do you see that with the groups you work with?
Yeah, and the thing is, I don't see enough of the situation where the CEOs are out with the customers, where the senior people are out with the customers. They think they know what the customers want, but will often, on their behalf, go interview the customers, and that's not what the customers want at all. And so if there was 5 more hours in a week that any of you have, or 8 more hours, get out with customers and find out where they're going, how you can be there as their partner and meet them or help them get where they need. So many CEOs remember the customers from yesterday, but they don't really understand where the customers are trying to go. And it's kind of fun to go out and meet with customers. You're not selling, and hopefully you're not there on damage control to fix something that's wrong. You're just saying, where are we going? How can we help you get there? So any 5 hours you can harvest, spend it with the customers. That'd be great.
Actually, I'll echo that. I think that is absolutely 100% critical. So when companies are developing new strategies, you'll see maybe they'll reach out to these big consulting groups or McKinsey or whatever, and what McKinsey or somebody, I don't mean to pick on them, but what they'll do is they'll ask you what you think about the markets, and maybe they'll go talk to your customers, and then they'll come back and tell you what their customers said. And really, these small companies, it's just time with the customer, out in the field, understanding, and you may recognize, typically, if you're close enough to the customer, you're going to recognize a problem that they don't even know they have, and you can come up with a solution. Wait a minute, so that's your issue. We can solve that in the following manner, and they don't even know it. But that's that fail fast and kind of work your way to the strategy that ultimately works is just being tight with the customer. And actually, in our business too, healthcare. I mean, healthcare is is, I'll tell a little anecdote actually. Healthcare is moving just incredibly quickly. With the Affordable Care Act, with all the changes, with every time there's new legislation in Hartford, they're cutting Medicaid, hospitals are under siege. We sell to hospitals, and so the dynamic is just changing. How you actually sell a product into the hospital has changed radically in the last 5 years, and even more dramatically in the last 2. And so if there's somebody who hasn't been out in the customer talking to them over the last year even, you're way behind. You don't know, you really don't know what's going on. When I first got to CASMED, as we were failing fast with our distribution organization, trying to turn over people, find the right people to put on the bus, we actually made mistakes. We were new. We didn't fully understand how our key product was sold into the hospital, and we went out and hired ex-COVIDian reps, GE reps, the kids, good looking from Central Casting that, would go, and they were order takers, and they all failed. We had 4 hires and all 4 of them failed because we didn't really understand our market well enough. And what we needed was just kind of misfits and people with they get a bone in their teeth and they won't let go, and they're a bunch of oddballs, and that's the profile of the sales rep we needed, and we went and found them, and they're killing it. But it was, we were new to the industry, so I can give ourselves a pass and say we failed fast, but anybody who'd been in that product industry for any time should have known and recognized the mistake we made ahead of time.
David, maybe you could comment on your interaction with your customers and the impact that they have and influence they have on your strategies.
Well, for our business, so we're our communications company, so we teach other companies how to figure out who their target is, how to talk to them, how to create their messaging, how to find them. So within that same vein, as part of our culture, we have postmortems about postmortems. I mean, if we pitch a new customer, we have a pitch postmortem to find out what we did right, what we did wrong, what we could have done better. If we land a project or a retainer, we're constantly checking in, talking to the customers, trying to understand exactly what their needs are, what's changing in their business. Because it's it's constantly evolving. No matter the small business that has very limited time, very limited resources, they may need one thing, and then we're working with some of the biggest companies in the world now, and they're changing probably faster. Budgets are up and down in these multi-billion-dollar companies, and I've never seen anything like it before, where the budgets are, one minute you have a budget, a week later it's gone. One minute you have a point of contact, the next minute they're gone. And within that vein, you have to really understand the people that you're working with. So that definitely, I always tell every customer, every company that we work with, every person we work with, that B2B, B2C is really, it's about people. And I've seen even like Unilever, we do business with Unilever, and they just had, their CMO just recently said, it's not, we won't call them customers anymore, we call them, marketing to people. And we've been saying that for many years, and it's critical to understand that, know who your customers are, and figure out what makes them tick.
There's a piece of that I also I agree with. I think it's critical. So often, I think in business, we can go to our desk and we get captured by the issue of the day, or the issue of the week, or email, or some such thing that prevents you from simply thinking about your business. And putting a couple of smart people in a room to actually think about it, to do your postmortem on your postmortem, I also think is brilliant. The U.S. military has what they call after-action reports. I don't know if you guys have heard about this. But anytime there's any kind of battle or skirmish or exercise, they go back and they get all the people, the commanders in the room, and they ask 4 very simple questions. What did we intend to have happen? What actually happened? And that's only about 10% of the analysis. And then the other 90% is, well, what did we learn from that? And then what will we do differently? And I think, if you're going after customers and if you actually take the time to just think, I mean, it seems stupid, but just spend an hour, spend a half hour thinking, you're going to say, hey, wait a minute, you're going to come up with ideas. Why did we lose the last 3? Well, we weren't given the right product, our approach was wrong, whatever. But smart people in the room actually thinking about it really makes a difference.
Especially to Bill's point, where when something applies to your business, and this is your angle, this is your strategy, this is the type of business you want to do, and then something kind of comes in and it's a little bit off the beaten path, but you want to try it, that specific job that you're going to take, or that customer really deserves the attention, because if you're going to take that, you're going to stress your business in any way, and you're not going to learn as much as possible to understand and completely dissect that what you did there, then you might as well not take on that business.
I have a series of other questions, but I thought maybe it might be a good time to ask the audience if there's any questions. John?
You guys started off with a conversation around vision, which I thought was terrific. If I break that down, obviously you, the CEO, the leaders of the organization, key management, you know it. What are you doing to make sure that that vision is understood through the rest of the organization? If everybody can execute against that vision or that strategy that you have.
You got to measure it. You got to communicate it, I think, and then you got to communicate it constantly. We talk about our values, our vision, our mission all the time. We talk about it in management team meetings every week. We talk about it in our quarterly, what we call town hall meetings with all of our associates. I talk about it when I walk around. We send emails. We recognize the values we recognize the actions that support those values every day. Nice job. Here's our mission. Here's our values. That was a great example of it. But I think it's really about communicating it, and then to the extent then that the mission and the vision lead to a strategy with tactical components to it. You can't. If you can't measure it, you can't meet the metric, and so we have all sorts of metrics that line up to the tactics that build up to this successful strategy, and those we review no less than monthly with individuals, but they're tied into everybody's MBOs and quarterly reviews with the management team, etc. But very, very structured, very structured.
We're probably not as structured as that, but we do put out, every week we put out a newsletter on the company to all employees on what's the company doing, what new orders are coming in, how we're doing financially, what customers might be visiting, what facilities. Every month we put out a detailed report to the management team and the senior shop people that goes over all the departments and what they're doing, what they've done in the month, what they're doing ahead. And then we put out an annual report that kind of lists the goals of each of the managers, how they did last year, what are their goals for next year. So we do a lot of written communication. Day to day, we don't take the time to communicate like you do. We do have general senior management meetings 3 or 4 times a year where we do talk about the vision, but that's really just for the senior management, and that doesn't get down to the machinists and the electronic tech, so that could be a shortcoming of what we're doing.
I guess our urging would be to presume the situation is very much like it is in your world, that the CEOs could spend 10x the amount of time communicating the vision, and how what we're now doing links into the vision, to your point. Senior people understand the vision because it was born inside them. And I remember talking to a CEO I have an enormous amount of respect for, and I said, John, your folks just don't understand where you're trying to take this. He said, I told them 5 times what I want to do. It doesn't matter. They don't get it yet. So the more time you can spend with your people and listen to them and see if they describe your vision back to you and their role in executing that vision. And there's often a gap, and that's just an opportunity gap. It's people don't understand what's going on in the back of our heads as the visionaries for our firms.
It could also be I'll call it a design gap too, in that if the vision just comes from me and I dictate it, it's not going to work. And my management team has to truly buy into that, and they can't buy into it unless they've had a say in it, and you've brought them together and had a dialogue about it. Make sure it's you can have honest talk. You can have respectful disagreement, and then everybody sort of at least gets some buy-in. Because without the buy-in, people just sort of nod their head and go, well, it's another vision, another mission. This is great. We're going to watch this one fail too, because the good management's going to forget about it in 2 weeks.
I think it's a lot of this is about execution too, and holding people responsible to what they need to do to make this all happen. So, any other questions?
Just in all this strategy development, once you've got your big idea, your vision, is there a point in the process where actually creating a real business plan is appropriate to kind of vet whether your strategy is something that you can actually deliver on with the resources that you have, or business plans passe at this point?
We develop a financial plan every year, okay? And that's, I think there's a difference between a strategic plan and a business plan. So business plan, I think when you're smaller, is very important. As you grow, you need to have a longer term strategy and a method of executing that. So we actually developed a vision of where we want the company to go. We develop a technology plan that supports that vision, and we develop a financial plan that more or less runs the business day to day, month to month, and hopefully generates enough cash to make that investment in the strategic plan.
So the use of the word passe, I think if you will, the old-fashioned business plans or strategic plans no longer work very well. We say that if you've got a strategy and you haven't refreshed it in the last 6 to 9 months, you ought to get on with it because it's probably out of date. So these 5-year plans and 4-year plans, except that perhaps in businesses of yours that have a very long lead time, you've really got to be with it today. But we do think it makes sense to have 5 or 6 pages that capture the vision and the activities, I'll use different words, but the initiatives you're going to take in the next 6 months to get there. Because unless you get it down on paper, it's very hard to remember it. And unless you get it down on paper, it's hard to have thought it out very carefully. So we're not on a lot of paper or strategic planning in the old-fashioned sense, but getting a plan of action down on paper makes a lot of sense. The management team signs up to your point. This whole management team contributes to, and they own it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's critical to get it down in writing, particularly the tactics, because as you add up all these tactics that you're going to need to execute, you may all of a sudden say, "Whoa, wait a minute! We don't have the capital for that. We don't have the people." I think in small companies, one of the critical functions a management team can do is identify their priorities, and everything can't be a priority, so you have to pick and choose and say, you know what, this isn't going to work because we just don't have the horsepower to do it. So we have to scale this back a little bit. This strategy is too aggressive. We can't get there. In our company, we actually, I just happen to have this because I always carry it around with me, but that's what we end up with. It's one page. To your point, it's not 12 pages. It's one page. We got our values, our mission, our strategic themes, and the goals and the specific tactics that people are responsible for. But coming up with that takes a lot of time and effort. And as as the management team sits down and goes through that, we realize that there are competing priorities, resources that we have or need or don't have or need, and then keeping track of this. And even within this, on we refresh this, we don't refresh it, but we revisit it all the time to say, that's fourth on the list, and we're just not going to get to that because we just don't have time. And stay focused on the things that really matter to drive your business forward.
Don't fail on these first.
Don't fail, yeah. If there's a conflict in time or resources, number 1 and 2 is it. And so forget about 3 and 4.
I just want to go back to the vision question real quick about getting the vision communicated and then measuring it. Just because we do things a little bit different at my company, so we don't need a newsletter. I can just shout across the room. But we have a program, and I can't think of the name right now, but I'm happy to share it with everyone at some point if I can remember. If you want to contact me, we have a program that twice a week actually asks a question, and it's cloud-based, and it goes out to everyone in the company. So on Monday, when you walk in the company, it says, "What are you working on this week?" And everyone just types in whatever's on the top of their mind, and they can choose whether they want to share it with everyone publicly or if they just want to send it, and it goes to just 2 of us have access to this, and we can read it as at our leisure. And that creates a lot of collaboration and communication inside the company because everyone gets to see what everyone else is doing, and it also keeps everyone accountable within the company. So it's a culture thing, and that's a big part of our vision, is to have a great culture. And then we'll sprinkle in other questions. So sometimes it might be like we're fixing our healthcare, right? Healthcare is a big thing right now. So we'll ask people what they know about HSAs and what they think about high deductibles and stuff like that. But every so often, and more often than the questions about the healthcare, we'll ask them questions about, what do you think about our customers? What do you think our customers think of us? What do you think makes us unique? What do you think makes you unique? And just all types of questions like this, and then to see the answers come in, and sometimes they're funny and people find humor in it, and it makes it light, and it's lighthearted in a sense, but there's a lot of gold there in mine. And from there we're able to see, and when you ask a question, what do you think the vision of the company is, and then you get to find out really quickly, is the easiest measurement, what the answers are. And then to your point about reviews, quarterly reviews, we always kind of come up with the matrices to see, here's your strength, here's your weaknesses, what are your, 1, 2, or 3 initiatives that you're going to work on this quarter, and then when we're done having that conversation and we've gone over everything, or when the managers have gone over everything, we'll always tell everybody where we're headed and what we're thinking about the business, and we're lucky to have been, we've been trending for quite some time, so it's always pretty positive, a positive outlook. But we want everyone to know where we're going, so we're very transparent from our assistants all the way up to the company.
I was going to ask for larger companies, as you enter a growth phase or even a turnaround phase, but after that first inflection point where that new senior management is coming in, triaging, gasping for air, how do you reward people? Stay facile, identify new opportunities, reward people accordingly. So in addition to staying integrated with the customers, perhaps even at the C-suite level, what other ways do you find new opportunities, stay with the market, maybe even a little bit ahead of it?
So it's a question of how do you keep your employees engaged, or is it more kind of an evolving strategy?
More the latter than the former. How do you find new opportunities? How do you reward people accordingly so you stay fresh as a company, even as you enter that phase 2, phase 3 growth period as an institution?
I'll take a run at it. I think our sense is the leaders in the company, whether it's 10% of the folks or 25% of the folks, the ones that are going to get you where you want to go, they're hungry for more to do. We worry a lot about compensation. Well, we reward them, and we think compensation is very important. It needs to be competitive, and you need to know what that means. But after the comp is competitive, we think one of the biggest rewards to talented people is to give them something else to do. Give them something to do that will help get you where you're trying to go. We've had this with ever so many clients that, gee, we want to get into this market, but we can't get there. And so one of the things we do is sit down with the CEO and say, let's look at your senior athletes. What happens if he or she would be given that challenge? And it's amazing the people that pop. With help, you have to be there with them. But so we think growth is a lot about looking at the athletes you have and knowing they're hungry to do more and giving them a chance to grow with the company and help the company grow. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I agree. Compensation is clearly important. You have to be at a market rate. I think you have to, in our business, we reward substantially for success. But you're right. It's people stay at companies because they feel connected. They feel they're adding value. They feel that they're playing a role. They feel a sense of community amongst their peers, and that's really critical, I think.
But in addition to the outreach to the customers, how else are you finding out what those new opportunities are? In addition to the kind of HR aspects, how are you finding out if you have R&D elements at some point that are necessary for firms? Is it all just a function of getting with your customers?
Well, we attend conferences regularly, so industry conferences are very important for us. And you hear what the vision is for the future there. With our customers, we hear more about their day-to-day problems. We try and come up with ideas to solve those problems.
Yeah, our R&D is a very big part of our strategy. New products, new applications, new clinical situations where our products can improve care. And so, again, I guess, some of that is freewheeling, some of it's understanding healthcare in general, looking beyond where we are today and seeing where the parallels are or where there might be opportunities. Trade shows. I tend to try and get out and see other managers, CEOs, executives of many other companies. Hey, you don't know me, but we should know each other. Let's have lunch. And I always come away with some little nugget from that I kind of tuck away and at some point in the future go, you know what? Maybe this is a nice product to add that's synergistic with what we have.
John, do you have a follow-up?
Well, I think I just built on that. And a vignette to go with it, that we're working with a client now that's struggling. And I was talking to the head of technology, and it's a technology company. And a number of their engineers were engaged in an activity that frankly I couldn't figure out why they were doing it, but I hadn't studied it carefully. But I said, I understand what you're doing, you're investing a lot in it, but what are your competitors doing? And they said, we have no idea what our competitors are doing. And I wanted to cry. So another way to think about where are we going and how we're going to get there is know what the competitor, or at least have a hypothesis of what the competitors are trying to do. And that can drive your strategy. That can drive your activity. But that really got my...
And your customers will tell you what your competitors are doing too. That's another reason to be close to the customers. Hey, what's happening here? What do you hear? What do you hear? What's new? I see you got some. You just published an abstract. Tell me about that. And it's amazing what you'll learn about your competitors from your customers if you're tight, and they trust you too. You just can't show up and they're gonna barf all this information on you. You gotta develop a relationship with them. Sure.
But I would argue that you, as the CEO, are going to learn a lot more than if you bury it too far down in the organization. Well, we'll let the marketing people tell you the answer to that. The CEOs get out on the street, and you'll hear things no one that works for you hears.
As an anecdote, actually, I was just with customers. I visited 4 hospitals down in Houston last week, and I traveled with our local sales rep. I got meetings because I've got CEO on my business card that he couldn't get. He actually set them all up. I didn't set any of them up. We got meetings that we could have gotten. This one guru of cardiac surgery. He was supposed to give us 15 minutes, maybe. He gave us 3 hours, and we learned stuff. And his eyes were wide open because it was just because I was there Not because I'm anybody special, but just because I had CEO on my card.
Well, with
And that was the difference.
With all due respect, maybe the CEO title mattered, but I think the CEO title is with you because you've got a capacity to grasp things that a lot of other people don't have. So you'll ask questions the other folks don't have.
David,
Lots of
you wanna
CEOs don't
comment?
have the time.
Yeah, well, I don't think it applies to all businesses, all industries necessarily, but it shouldn't matter small or large. For us, we have a couple of things. We have, we call it Digital Surgeons Labs, which is just products that people want in the company to try out and test. Born from the labs, responsive design, mobile design is pretty huge right now. And a couple of years ago, we kind of forecasted it where it was going that it was going in that direction. And inside of that labs, we decided to build a framework, and that framework is now the second largest framework in the world. It's an open source framework called Gumby. And that gave us thought leadership in the industry that we've been able to sell against for the last 2 years, and it's paid tons of dividends. And we've done everything from Google Glass projects to hacking Microsoft Connect and doing all these like interesting technologies inside of that labs. The other two areas that we use is that program that I was talking about before. Right around the start of the fourth quarter, we'll ask questions to the staff and ask them, where do you think the industry is going? What do you think we're missing? And combine everyone's knowledge where they can read about it and then add to it, and then you turn the entire company into essentially futurists. And you mine that, and then you use that. And then the third piece for us is that lots of companies are now catching on, large companies are now catching on, and they're starting labs or incubators. So BMW has an incubator, Unilever has an incubator, I believe Pepsi has one, Verizon, Comcast, and if you do some Google detective work, you can actually find what they're looking for. They actually put it right on these sites. Now, they're not on the corporate sites for you to find, but through some clever keyword usage, you find them, and when you find them, you find out that they're looking for this in social, or this in the supermarket, or this in the medical field, and they're willing to actually invest money up front to help you get where they want to go, and then they'll put it across their entire company. So you're essentially pre-selling. It's a nice feature. So, and I've seen, we've worked with 3 or 4 companies that have had success doing that.